In October 2005, skeletal remains of a creature hundreds of feet long were uncovered in Iran. After careful excavation, the skull alone was found to measure 85 feet. Soon a humanoid skeleton over 50 feet tall washed ashore in India, followed by an enormous eel figure made of bone discovered in the Philippines, a giant bull in the Arctic, and a strange statue in Peru. So what was happening in 2005? It wasn't industrial runoff causing mutations. It was the release of Shadow of the Colossus. Welcome to Game Arcadia, the peak of gaming culture. I'm Jenna Stieber, and I'm unearthing the weirdest behaviors in video game communities. Why me? Well, I have a master's degree in media and culture, and I know about things that Wikipedia doesn't, which makes me the oracle. Ico was released in 2001 and is one of the early games considered art. And like a lot of art, it didn't sell well or make much money. But it did become the emblematic cult classic game of the 2000s, highly regarded and hard to get a hold of. So for the release of Shadow of the Colossus, Sony was determined to make it a financial success. They poured money into marketing ahead of the October release, with billboards, competitions, a demo at E3, and some truly insufferable machinima called Dr. Philpra, the Colossus Whisperer.
You've let yourself down with yourself. Let's start again, but this time we'll begin with an injection of chemical castration serum, which is normally administered to bulls who...
And because it was the 2000s, they also commissioned an ARG. Back when losing touch with reality was a fun hobby and not the dominant cultural mode, ARGs, or alternate reality games, were a revolutionary marketing strategy. They had elaborate stories and complicated webs of blogs, videos, podcasts, and images, all made by characters in-universe. People played them by treating any information as though it was reality, not fictional. If there was an email, you reached out for the next puzzle. If there was a phone number, somebody bit the bullet and called to get a clue. Everything in fiction was made to feel real, like you had gotten lost in a strange town on the information highway. ARGs worked because internet users of this time were less gullible than they are now. It's not that individuals were smarter or dumber, plenty of people were still getting duped by hoaxes, but people overall were less credulous. Everyone understood that you simply cannot trust information you see online. It was way less common to use your real name or identity, so you didn't take for granted that anybody was who they said they were. Famously, on the internet, nobody knows if you're a dog, or a bot programmed by international actors to promote political conspiracies, or a massive marketing company. During this period, viral videos or astonishing claims were dissected and interrogated, so if they tied into a new media property, somebody would inevitably suss that out. Then it was a fun way to engage with a neat media universe. A lot of huge properties made ARGs to promote their release. There was The Beast for Steven Spielberg's AI artificial intelligence, Why So Serious for The Dark Knight, and I Love Bees for Halo 2.
Half buried in the sand and stretching 150 feet beneath the ocean lies something that may change paleontologists' understanding of prehistoric biology.
The ARG for Colossus was called Gianttology. It was developed by a marketing studio under the massive international ad agency TBWA. Even if you're a fan of Shadow of the Colossus, you might not know that it ever existed. As of the moment this video airs, the campaign isn't mentioned anywhere on Wikipedia. If you read the game's entry, you'd think the most extravagant part of its marketing was pre-order bookmarks. The main hub of the ARG was a blog called Gianttology, written by the fictitious Eric Belson under the guise of working on a book about giants. Posts go all the way back to January 2005, detailing vacations and Belson's relationship with his girlfriend. It's the kind of mundane detail that really suggested it was real. On October 5th, Belson posted a link to a website by the fictional archaeologist Casper Schilling, a totally real and normal name for somebody who's definitely not an ad stooge. This site had pictures of Schilling next to the massive remains of a creature stealthily modeled after Colossus 13, my personal favorite. This thread went basically unnoticed by the internet. But the very next day, Belson posted a news report from India of a newly unearthed giant skeleton that bore a striking resemblance to the first Colossus.
The remains are being examined to help scientists solve this colossal mystery.
The fake report is referencing the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which did actually uncover some ancient ruins in Tamil Nadu, and was the deadliest tsunami in history, which makes it a totally fun backstory for this light internet mystery. This video is where Gianttology really popped off. According to the profile of Glenn Sanders, who worked at TBWA during this time, this video reached 1.5 million views on the first day it was uploaded, but I wouldn't trust that number. The same portfolio also incorrectly states that the video was posted, quote, before YouTube even existed, and it's literally called propagandary, so take it all with a grain of salt. But it is clear that this video did go viral. By October 13th, it had made its way to Snopes, a debunking news site that was iconic of the era. Although it was later updated to false, the video was initially labeled unproven, a rating that acted as a placeholder while research was conducted. Thanks to Snopes, a thread about Gianttology was opened on the Unfiction forums, the premier place where ARGs were discussed and played. Some speculated it could be an ARG for NBC's new sci-fi series, Surface, a show so memory-holed I could not even pirate it. Players weren't sure if Belson, the author of Gianttology, was in on it or not, so they did what good ARG players do. They tried to interact. They sent emails fishing for clues and playing into the idea that this was all totally real. They got no response, which is pretty unusual for an interactive media campaign. Journalists at Kotaku immediately clocked it as being an ad for Colossus. As an ad campaign, it was going about as well as anyone could ask. The video was viral, people connected it back to the game, and everyone was talking about it.
You're actually armed with a magical sword, which if you hold it up to the light, it's almost like a Gandalf experience.
On the 10th, Gianttology linked an in-fiction website by a scuba diver named Ed Geiler, another totally normal name for a real human being. The site contained photos of a massive eel skeleton in the waters of the Philippines. Although the photos are compelling, this didn't make much of a splash. There was an email address, but it sent back a delivery error. The address was wrong on the site. Then, on October 18th, Shadow of the Colossus came out. It was a massive success immediately, outselling Ico in the first 6 weeks of its release and blowing past expectations.
Well, if you're adventurous with the kind of gaming you do, this is for you.
Now, most corporate ARGs wrap up before the base media is released so that people could shift their focus to the game or movie. But Gianttology wasn't like most corporate ARGs. It was bad. Although the faked images and videos were high quality, the structure and game aspects were a mess. And this is most clear with the introduction of Arcadia Simkin. On October 21st, 3 days after the release of the game in North America, Gianttology posted a video and a link to Simkin's website. I couldn't figure out what the name pun was here, maybe sim for simulation? Drop a comment if you can figure it out. The video features scientists landing near the North Pole, climbing on a giant body, and uncovering small patches of fur. It certainly doesn't look like Rudolph to me. More like the second Colossus, a bull-like creature. Simkin refers to it as Taurus Major. This video went viral too. It got some coverage as a Colossus tie-in, including on G4 TV. It was posted to Dig, as well as supernatural interest sites like Museum of Hoaxes, UFO Casebook, The Anomalist, and Contraband. It was even discussed on Coast to Coast AM, the seminal paranormal radio show, but correctly labeled as a hoax. This is when the ARG really started heating up. So far, despite the best efforts of players, nobody had uncovered a story or any sort of puzzle. There is no interaction. Emails to Belson went unanswered, and both Schilling and Geiler's addresses returned delivery failure messages. But emails to Simkin's address actually went through. And even better, somebody responded. Players finally got some interaction from somebody claiming to be Simkin's friend. He said that Simkin was missing and that his website had been hacked by the sinister oil company Polar Neft. And indeed, players found that the email on the website had been changed. A conspiracy was afoot. Another Colossus was found, a statue modeled after the third Colossus, discovered in Peru by some tourists.
So cool.
As November rolled around, people on the Unfiction forum were still waiting for something to actually happen. Geiler's email address had been corrected, but the people running the ARG still didn't bother responding to any messages, and there were no follow-ups from either Simkin address. A hastily made in-universe website popped up pointing blame at Polarneft for Simpkin's disappearance, but essentially acting as another portfolio of success. A hidden link on the site took you to a page asking for a password. There was finally a puzzle, but it also had an index header that began Sony/PlayStation/SOTC_dev. How sloppy, and on the only puzzle of the ARG. Interest in the campaign had fully died out by the end of November. After all, Colossus was out, and it was clear the ARG was never more than a handful of blog posts with high-quality fakes. On December 26, Belson posted an image of Colossi glyphs discovered in a cave in Zambia, and said he's got a plane ticket to Peru to investigate the Incan statue. That's the last he was heard of, because the holiday season had ended, and there was no reason to do marketing anymore. But the best twist of the ARG was yet to come. A few years after the release, somebody with an account named Arcadia Simpkin reopened the unfiction thread. Was it a new clue? A long-awaited conclusion to his missing person story? No, it was a confession. During the run of the game, a player had reached out to Simpkin's original email address. They got a delivery error, as other players did for Schilling and Geiler. But instead of letting it stand, they made Simpkin's email address. It was up for grabs because the ad agency had never bothered to create it. This interloper was the one saying that Simpkin had been kidnapped and that his website had been hacked. When the people running the campaign saw that they had lost control, they had no choice but to change the email on the website, incidentally giving credence to his story, which means the only interaction or story with this campaign was actually a player hoaxing the hoax. As is often the case with marketing companies, this agency knew a lot about making ad campaigns, but they didn't know anything about the subculture and audience that they were actually marketing to. So they didn't bother to make the emails that were publicly posted on the websites because they didn't know how ARGs worked or how people would play them, and they didn't care. Also, Colossus is a strange property to select for the ARG treatment. It's not set in this reality, not even in the long ago past or far distant future. It's high fantasy. Turning the Colossi into buried artifacts implied that the Forbidden Land was actually ancient Earth. That doesn't make any sense. It would be like if they set a He-Man movie in our reality, which they did, and it was bad. The coverage that Gianttology got from gaming websites was basically just, oh look, Shadow of the Colossus, a game you already know and are hype about, got a viral marketing campaign. Since it wasn't in-universe, there wasn't much reason to dive deep on the campaign's lore. Like, nobody named Ed Geiler is gonna show up in the game. This isn't a Hideo Kojima property. The materials associated with the campaign were viewed and shared a lot. The numbers I've seen are viewed by 25 million people in 110 countries, but that has no citation or source, so again, take it with a salt rim of doubt. Since ARGs lived on word of mouth, I think this counts as a win. But if somebody could clock it as marketing, it's because they were already excited for the game. And that probably has more to do with Sony's traditional marketing strategies than the ARG. Despite the campaign's viral success, Gianttology has all but been forgotten. It rarely gets mentioned when people talk about Shadow of the Colossus, even in retrospectives and deep dives. It doesn't appear on Wikipedia, and basically all of the original sources for the ARG have been obliterated, accessible only thanks to the Internet Archive. But the materials made for the ARG are still floating around, context-free, potentially convincing people that giants once walked the Earth. In the end, Gianttology was too successful as a hoax to be remembered as a game.